Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Over the Borders podcast. Unfortunately, we are not recording anymore from the UPEACE campus in Costa Rica, but today we are from really all over the world. I am from a cold evening night in Italy, and Nikki instead is from Vancouver today, and we have our special guest, Professor Amr Abdalla.
And
Yeah,
I'm in Washington, D.C.
yes. Dr. Abdullah is from Washington, D.C. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As Daria said, today we have Dr. Abdullah as our guest. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Abdullah. And just to give you a context, Dr. Abdullah has been our prof in the UN-mandated University for Peace in Costa Rica, and he's been one of the favorite profs of all UPCers.
Yeah, we all
Um,
remember our classes with him. They had so many memorable moments,
oh
and
my God,
they
yeah.
were really the introduction to how special also our time in UPeace was, and he was really the perfect uh,
Start.
teacher to really delve into the concepts of peace building.
Absolutely. As Dario mentioned, we had the privilege of taking the Foundations of Conflict Resolution and Peace Building course with Dr. Abdallah. So, Doctor, let's start the talk. And again, thanks for joining us today. So, in the light of your extensive experience in conflict analysis and resolution, particularly in Muslim communities, and considering your Egyptian background, can you share your insights on why Hamas initiated a terrorist attack after a long period of no active armed attack, an armed conflict between the two parties of this conflict, the Palestine and Israeli attack, war that's been going on? And what's your overall perspective on the situation?
Okay, well, thank you. First, I would like to thank the two of you, Nikki and Dario, so much for inviting me, and for sure, the connection to you, Pacers, is I would say that the most valuable part of my professional life and everything else. So whenever I am called by you, Pacers, to do any activity anywhere in the world, I would not hesitate. Definitely. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate this initiative and the work you're doing. So let me get into the
Thank you very
topic
much.
directly. I have to say that first, Nikki. I mean, I'm happy that you started by saying why Hamas did what they did. I mean, I think that the why opened the door for us to start to dig deeper, and I think this is the point we want to do, is not necessarily to stay with a superficial level. As I always say, when we teach about peace and conflict, we need to appreciate complexity. And when I say appreciate complexity, I am also not taking that other direction that I have seen some people try to use it to push away the what's happening and say, oh, it's just too complex, as if don't think about it, it's too difficult for you. No,
Absolutely.
I am not saying that. That's not the approach I'm taking. But I also do not think it is useful to isolate what happened on October 7th from the context, historic and otherwise. Because if we do that, we will never really understand the why. That's why I say the why question is so important. And I would say I just would like to qualify that I think that October 7, what happened was suddenly something popped up. It took more attention in the media for understandable reasons, but it was actually in the middle of several interactions that are violent, and it was a response to a great extent. Even the name, by the way, I don't know if you are aware of the Arabic meaning of the label that Hamas has given to that action. They call that Tufan al-Aqsa. This is the name of the operation, like the Operation Desert Storm, Operation whatever it is. This one is called the Operation Tufan al-Aqsa, and that means the Al-Aqsa, the famous Muslim
The
mosque
mosque, yeah.
in Jerusalem. Yeah, the mosque. So Al-Aqsa hurricane. This is what it translates to. And hurricane as in what? Hurricane as a response to a lot of violations that have been taking place for the last several years. And of course, again, here, of course, that's another big important factor in thinking about the issue of Palestine-Israel conflict. Number one, what do you name it? Palestine-Israel, Arab-Israel, or that's one. Second is, do you go back how far to understand the issues? So there are many ways to think of how to address it. But I would say if I try to have a more of the immediate issues of, then I have to understand that this was a response by Hamas and other groups that they see themselves as a legitimate resistance movements who are fighting occupation, and that this was a response to violence have been committed over and over again against Palestinians in many places, including in the West Bank and in Jerusalem, and that hence that name. So the action itself, of course, took a lot of attention because of the magnitude, because of the quality of what happened. That was hardly what we have seen before. In the past, it used to be scrimmages between the Israeli forces bombing Gaza, and then the Hamas and others will throw rockets, and that's as far as it gets. There might be one attack here or there, killing one or two, three people, one way or the other. But this magnitude, this organization of the whole operation, and the casualties that the Israelis endured in the beginning, all of this actually made it something that took a lot of attention. However, as you said correctly, we need to ask the why, and the why can be put in the context of this has been ongoing violent conflict on both sides. Of course, with each side claiming legitimacy for the use of violence, like we see in every conflict. The Israelis, they say we are in a state of self-defense. And the Palestinians see that they are in state of self-defense, but in addition, they are legitimate resistant movements who are trying to liberate themselves from occupation and oppression and the injustice that is inflicted on them in the form of apartheid. That's how they see it. So, so this is the very short context of October 7 and what happened, and that resulted in the reaction that we have been seeing for the last 2-3 months, that led to almost 30,000 Palestinians killed, majority children and women.
Professor, I would like already to link with a question, because I really like one word that you use, which is complexities. Mm-hmm. And there is a trend that we see in many conflicts regarding the role of the media, because they really contribute, first of all, to polarize public opinion, or actually really direct public opinion in one direction, and also to frame the narrative of a conflict, often oversimplifying all the complexities and the context. So in this case, for example, as you said, the world's attention went back to Palestine and Israel because of the attacks that happened in October. And this was like, for people, for an audience that is not informed, coming out of nowhere. But they were not aware of the complexities and of the context and what was going on already since before, like in 2023, for example, all the violations that were happening in Al-Aqsa Mosque. So what is your opinion regarding the role of the media and the impact they are having, especially now?
Oh, thank you. I mean, this is, of course, I have to say that, of course, as ugly as this situation is, and the loss of lives and destruction, and it is very traumatic. But I think that in the process, and maybe this is one of the benefits of many conflicts, is to reveal, to uncover some of the deeper issues that we actually have to confront with courage. And I think that the role of media, even though we are aware historically of how media can play a role that can be very negative, especially at times of conflict, we are also aware of bias across the board when the media outlets address any issue, because they try to embrace a certain attitude Some media outlets are very naive and they just are very clear that they are so biased and they don't care. They are mouthpiece for one side or the other. Other media, and this is where I think that the benefit of what we are seeing, try to pretend to be professional and neutral, and they have mastered the use of language that can make it look like they know what they are doing and they are professional. But what I see over and over again is that, especially Western media, and that, of course, that's such a broad term. But for example, I mean, the reason I said Nikki's question, why October 7th, was very good because I'm sure you are aware that most of the Western media, whenever they interviewed any person from the Arab world or Palestinian, the first question is, hey, before we start, that's what they say. Do you condemn Hamas? And people were getting tired of that question. And it's like, I mean, because they were doing exactly what you indicated. They're trying to extract this issue of October 7th out of any context and say, oh my God, those terrible people and how bad they did, and da 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 da. And then we start from here, and then we can easily just go through a discourse of Hamas is bad and terrible. Let's eliminate Hamas so we can have peace. Because this is the story that I think many Western media and governments also are trying to promote. So, but what I think is happening, they are being exposed. More of the officials and individuals, professionals and academicians from the Arab world and from Palestine, and not only those, and also from the West, there are amazing people who, when they are interviewed in Western media, they actually uncover those biases and they confront them. And I think that was very helpful because I have a feeling that the average viewer who is watching, as you said, that didn't know that there was anything before and doesn't understand what happened and think that was, oh, suddenly those guys went crazy. And of course, they are terrorists and bad people. Now they are thinking deeper and they are realizing, wait a minute, there is a complex story behind this that is worthy of understanding if I really want to understand. And this actually is turning the tide in terms of media. Of course, here I'm talking as you introduced me. I'm an Arab, I'm Egyptian, I'm so close to Palestine on many, many, many levels. I cannot explain how. But so for me, I mean, I'm not going to claim to be neutral, and I am trying to, of course, my assessment as a conflict resolution expert, I must be balanced in how I analyze things. But I cannot take my heart out of this and say, oh, I'm just totally like a robot who's analyzing things, almost an artificial intelligence analysis. No, I don't do that. I am aware of where I stand. I am aware of issues of justice and violations to human dignity and human rights that have existed for a long time. And I am aware that sometimes the best intervention in conflict situations is to take the stand against the oppressor. We cannot just to continuously say, let us just to, create artificially a playing field and say both sides are the same. And then we can say, let's now try to mediate between them and let's be nice to each other. It's not going to work when somebody is carrying the burden of the injustice that they have lived with for so many years. We need to, that's where empowerment as a big principle of our work in peace and conflict comes handy. When do we then use empowerment? Use empowerment when you know that there is injustice against a group of people, and you know that the only way to do that is to support them. Now, so for me, this is just critical. Now, the support doesn't negate objective analysis, but I need to be clear where I am. And I think that media and what they have done in the last 2-3 months, they kept using the old ways of doing things. But I think now they are faced by more savvy interviewees who are able, and also social media. I mean, that's another big factor. Social media opened amazing space for people to learn things and to express themselves, and that is not under the control of the traditional media. So I would say for the average viewer worldwide, they are getting better understanding of the situation. But they're also, of course, getting a lot of garbage in the process because that's what the space of social media can open. I mean, You have to use your discretion, you have to use your common sense to understand how to discern between different elements of or materials that you receive. However, I would say that the overall story is good news because more people understand the depth of the story. They can understand the injustice that has been going on, and they can frame things within this context. And because once you start to frame it like that, then number one, you can understand what's going on. Number two, you can start to think actually how we can find real solutions. Because now we understand it's no longer that we are just being fed a certain narrative that is intended only to hide injustices that happen. No, it's a big different story. So believe it or not, even though I laugh sometimes at some of the media figures that I see using the old stuff and realize that, oh my God, look at how they are getting exposed. So this is where I see the mediation. This whole story of what happened in the last 2 to 3 months is going to change a lot of things, not only for Palestine and Israel, but I think the whole world is learning new things, and even the use of media, use of the power of social media. Anyway, so so great question. I'm glad you asked.
Thank you. And I already want to say that this answer in the light when we were discussing, about the topic of the episode before starting, and we wanted to also ask you where to find hope, and already at least your perspective on the media is making me feel a bit more optimistic, at least on this side.
I tell you, I mean, as a matter of fact, thanks to social media, and again, being somebody who I identify 100% with the Palestinian cause, but not at the expense of not understanding the grievances and the fears of Jewish people, and this for me is a big part of the solution, is to embrace this. And this is something I have, if I am critical of attitude in the Arab world in general, is I will say that we have not done enough to embrace the fears and the sentiments of Jewish people. And I deliberately use the word Jewish people here. I'm not saying Israel. And because I can identify with their concerns about what happened to them through history. I can identify with the injustices they felt. I can identify with their need for safety and security as a community. Call it ethnically, call it religiously, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, I can understand where, and especially when you put in the mix what happened in World War II and the Holocaust, absolutely, you can identify and understand that those people really needed a space where they can be safe and to express themselves and their identity. There's no question about it. I believe that actually, because of that, there are large numbers of Jewish people who actually are about justice, are about human dignity. And for them, it doesn't matter. I would love to see on social media when some people say the expression never again, which was, of course, is connected to what happened in the Holocaust. They say it applies to everybody. So it applies to Palestinians as well. When you hear Jewish people coming out and saying this, when you see Jewish people taken to the streets in many places in the world and demonstrating to support Palestinian cause and to say, we realize something is going wrong there and we need to do something about it. When you see that, then that's, for me, this is the beginning of hope. Beginning of hope, why? Because not only because one side say, oh, the other side is the right one, okay, I'll give you everything, I leave. No, I want you to be with me. We want both of us to be in this land and to live together as equal, to live together as two sides entitled to be part of this, but not with one side imposing on the other and making the other side a second class, which was, I think, the big mistake of everything that happened in the last several decades with the whole project of Zionism, that part of it, whether you like it or not, is about actually subjugating a group of people. Because, I mean, I guess there was some fantasy that Zionism is about a land with no people for people with no land. Well, no, there was people in this land and they have been there forever. And if you're going to come and establish yourself there at their expense, what are you expecting? I mean, for me, this is really where we have all this problem. And any real solution will be about appreciating why those people want this piece of land and they think that this is where they belong and they're entitled to it. But can they do that and at the same time realize that equally there are people who have lived there forever before them and after them, and no matter how back in history you go, and both of them can coexist together. And I think actually I'm very optimistic. I have been actually for many years optimistic that Arabs and Jews and other groups can live together in this part of the world very peacefully and learn from and enjoy being with each other. And that's what we need to create the space for. And I don't know, my feeling is, believe it or not, when I think when all everything is said and done and this war stops, which I pray will happen very soon, I think the aftermath, people talking about the day after, and I think the day after is not going to go in the way that the Israeli government and US government are expecting. No, I think it's going to go in a different way that will represent the people, the sincere people on all sides. And this is a space of coexistence, a space of peace and safety and security for everyone, including the Jewish people, not at their expense at all. And for me, this will be the true story of peace that I have a feeling, I know that it may sound impossible right now, but I think that's what we should strive for. And it is possible. And I think everything happened in the last few months is opening the space and preparing us more and more in that direction.
Mhm. Dr. Abdullah, I have a question. As you said, you have hope for a future in which all the communities living there can live in coexistence and peace, right? But in the current conflict, I think a reason why this humanitarian crisis is happening is because of the power imbalance that's being created by the United States backing up Israel. So what is the solution to this? Because if there were the two groups, and we learned from you that the first thing, like one of the first things to do in the conflict resolution is to study the parties in a conflict. But here the parties are being backed up by the superpowers in the world. And what is the solution to that?
Very good. Excellent. Again, that for me is here is another dynamic that's happening thanks to the role of media and the role of the brave people, and not only the Arabs, again, and Muslims, especially the Jewish people who are taken to the streets and going to the Congress and saying no to this, not in my name. It becomes clear that, here's where I think one answer to this. U.S. Is a democracy based on elections, and supposedly you, as somebody representing your people, will actually do policies and try to achieve things that reflect what people want. Those elected officials in the United States, especially at the high level, have always been used to the narrative, the Israeli narrative, that and no concern much for the Palestinian or Arab issues. But things have changed in the last 3 months, as we have seen in universities, in communities, everywhere, that more of the average citizen, the citizen who votes, is actually saying, I don't appreciate that my money and my weapons are going to kill people like we see happening in Gaza now. And with more people are more aware of the context and realizing that, wait a minute, we are not fighting evil people as they make us think, but as much as we are actually killing civilians in the process, and we are ensuring the injustice that to continue against those people. The more people are embracing this, the more they are expressing it to their elected officials. And actually, one of my colleagues, Dr. Ibrahim Farihat, he wrote something on Facebook the other day that he observed that when Biden went to start a campaign in South Carolina, which is a southern state, and you think that he wouldn't have any kind of concern about the issue of Palestine, Israel. Actually, he had people shouting at him in his press conference or whatever speech he was giving, and they were shouting in favor of Palestine. And they are questioning him, when are you going to insist on ceasefire? When are you going to stop supplying weapons to Israel? And for him to get this kind of voice in South Carolina, which again, if you understand the geography of the United States, now we are talking about a southern state. Now, when he goes north, good luck to him, going to Boston, going to New England, going to New York. He would face even more challenges in many places. So for me, when you ask about how can we undo this power imbalance and understand the parties, I will say that if you understand the dynamics of the US as a party and the importance of making sure that if you want to be elected, that you reflect what people want, then of course it's not that simple because there are also competing interests and there are other voices that still want to do the old stuff. But still, if you realize that a large constituency that is not going to vote for you, if you continue with the old ways of doing things, this will start to have an effect on the leadership in the United States. And then, of course, also when you think about time, in the next generation, if in 10 years, 20 years, there will be new blood coming into the administration in the United States, more influenced by what I believe to be more accurate picture of what's happening. And I don't think that they will want to continue to give support in the old way because they realize, no, this is not a just war. As a matter of fact, some people started to make now an analogy of what's happening in Palestine on many levels and what was happening in Vietnam and in the Vietnam War. Whether the form of resistance and how it was effective against the oppressor or the occupying force, or the influence on the American people when American people took to the streets during Vietnam to say, not in our name. And they did not want this war. Eventually, it influenced the decision makers and they had to pull out. I think we are seeing something of that nature. So I am optimistic that we are seeing a change that may affect how the US is supplying support to Israel and how they will have to, at one point, to balance that support with understanding that you cannot continue if you don't really recognize the rights of Palestinians for dignified life. And this is where I see the hope.
So we were talking about power imbalances, and there is another issue that raised already in previous conflicts and here became very evident, and it's almost more such a close issue for us because we studied in the University for Peace, which is a UN mandated university. But the current conflict is showing all the fallacies in the system, in the UN system, where just one vote of a permanent member of the Security Council, or not even just one vote, but just one veto, can stop a resolution agreed by the majority of all countries, especially when you have really almost all the world that is siding at least for a ceasefire in the name of protecting human rights. So how do we deal with this when the same institution that should be operating in favor of human rights has failed to achieve even a negative peace for a very sustained amount of time?
Oh, well, this is really, really a heartbreaking issue. Because you are right that, I mean, we have all the hope that the United Nations should be the one to provide this, at least the security to civilians. But even that, it is unable because of the current system. And I maybe again maybe that is my a little bit pessimistic side. I don't have much hope whenever we deal with major conflicts when it comes to the United Nations, not because of the United Nations itself, but because of the way the charter was written, the way the superpowers are managing it and controlling decisions. Because the most important decision comes from the United Nations is the one related to the Security Council. Everything else is like really not mandatory, not obligatory, doesn't have teeth. But it is the Security Council and with Chapter 7 and so on, that's where you can actually start to take action. And you, as you said correctly, one country with a veto right that is based on whatever was the outcome of World War II. Imagine we're still living by that legacy of what happened at the end of World War II, and that's how those five countries have the veto. And mainly, who exercises that? Mainly the United States and the Soviet Union, Russia now. And of course, I don't see that the United Nations is in any position to be able to exercise a meaningful influence because itself needs major reform. And there was an effort to try to do some reform a few years ago, but it was like aborted. I mean, brutally actually. And it is very sad because we reached a point, I remember in that effort, that we thought we were so close to actually make some changes to the charter and the regulations. But when the superpowers realized that that will undermine their ability to control things, quickly they took it out of the table, off the table. So I say that for the UN, and this case actually is another maybe again alarm to all of us as humanity, that do we really want to keep the United Nations like this, totally paralyzed, even from the humanitarian side? I mean, I appreciate that the Secretary General went all the way to the border of between Egypt and Israel, standing there trying to appeal for sending humanitarian aid to Palestinians. And even that is not allowed, and the UN is unable to actually exercise anything to achieve that basic. Uh, Maybe, as I said, that I'm hopeful that there are a lot of changes that will happen out of this conflict. Maybe another one will be that we need to give the United Nations more power. And maybe that would be such another agenda that many of us peace lovers should maybe embrace. It's not about Palestine alone. It's about when we have a conflict and there are civilians who are getting hurt, we wanted to have an ability to intervene no matter how much the other parts are fighting, no matter how much the claim of human shield, which becomes a ridiculous claim when all those civilians are getting killed right and left, is being invoked. How can we make sure that there is space that is legal, that is enforceable, that will allow, no matter what, for support to civilians to take place? And without imposing on those civilians that, like some of them say, oh, leave your home, go to another country. No, no, that's what happened for 75 years. They always had a reason to kick Palestinians out. And many of them ended up in refugee camps in Lebanon, in Jordan, in many places, and Syria. So is this what when we told that there is a complex in the Arab world and in Palestine about leaving your home under such pressure because they're afraid they will never go back again. And I hope that people can understand that.
It's
That's
following
why,
the trauma of the Nakba, no? What is
yeah,
called.
exactly. Yeah. So who wants to do this one more time? And I think actually even the U.S. government started to pick on this. And I heard some statements yesterday from Blinken that, yeah, we are not going to accept that Palestinians will be relocated. Egypt is taking a strong stand that no, we are not going to take them in Sinai. It's not out of like greed or no, it is about you don't do that to any human being. You don't say get out of your home and go live somewhere else. And then what happens in reality is because I'm bringing my own immigrants from other countries in the name of whatever Zionism or whatever, and to come and live in this place. This is what's been happening in reality for 75 years. And I don't think that most people want to see a repeat. And so I think that maybe a space must be developed where we do advocacy and room and see what can we do as a community of peace to seize the opportunity and to try to make reforms. Here, that will be the skill of negotiations, the skill of how you can appreciate, as you said, Nikki, the power of certain parties. You know, the US is so powerful. You know, other countries are still powerful in the UN system. They will not easily let go of their power. So, how can we navigate our way that we are not going to touch your power, but there is a space that is about protecting humans? And that space we can find support for among the constituents in the powerful countries in the US and others who can put pressure on their representatives so that we can start to make reforms only in the space of humanitarian support. And I think if we can, out of this whole disaster, come up with such a reform, even if we keep the same system of veto and the same, but we can kind of carve out that one piece. Maybe that can be the strategy for a process to try to come up with something new that will help more civilians in times of war in the future.
Professor, with this, actually, you anticipated what I was going to ask you, because it was okay. We saw that the UN system basically failed, but what as international community is possible to do, especially because already from our classes at the University for Peace, we saw how almost it's impossible to reform the Security Council when the same 5 permanent members can stop with just one vote or one veto any reform to the Security Council. So it's really interesting and refreshing to hear how even like a massive change in public opinion can at least change the direction of a superpower. And in this case, we are, of course, obviously talking all about the United States, which are having the major role, and at least find more space to act for the humanitarian side of the conflict, which would be at least one first step. It's in my opinion.
Yeah, and again, I think that maybe what we need to understand is, yes, the U.S. as a government and everything and military powerful, but the good thing is it is a democracy, and every elected representative wants to win the next election, and the people of the United States have proven, especially during the Vietnam War, that they will stand up for justice, even against their own government. I don't think that I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that in history we have seen any situation when the people of a nation forced their government to stop a war because they felt that it was unjust, except for American people in the Vietnam War. And that for me is an inspiring example. And that can open the window for us, the community of peace, to say that, okay, if we know that those people will not, because thanks to democracy, thanks to the relative open space for expressing themselves, that they can actually take onto the streets and demonstrate even inside the Congress and to tell people this is wrong and we cannot accept it. And that can put pressure on their representatives because they want to win the next election. If this is the system, maybe that's still a little bit naive because things are more complex still. However, if we take this as a premise for our work, then we need to see how can we have good influence on American people to get them to become aware that the current system of the United Nations is actually damaging and causing pain and agony to so many people whenever there is a conflict. And I think the images, the media can play a big role here. We don't have any scarcity of terrible images of what those people have been suffering for the last few months. And if we can find a way to make this resonate with the average American who goes to vote, and to make this a case of humanity that we want to all embrace, then maybe we can get the US on our side in the United Nations because it becomes in their interest that they make this change. And maybe somebody running for office in 10 to 20 years will say that I will take it as part of my agenda to make a reform in the UN system to protect civilians in time of war. And that becomes actually an important ticket that they use in their election campaign. I mean, maybe we should try hard to go in that direction. That's how we can influence the US. Other countries, maybe the influence can be different, but that's part of the hard work of peace, is to be pragmatic, to understand what works in certain contexts, and to try to rally people who relying on that notion that people want to do something good for humanity. And if there is no threat to their interests, they will jump on the wagon with you. Who knows? Maybe we can start to imagine this and imagine how we can make it happen.
Perfect. And Doctor, talking about efforts for peacemaking, as we're talking right now, the International Court of Justice holds a public hearing in the case that South Africa accuses Israel of genocidal intent in Gaza. And do you think efforts like this are aligned with the peacemaking operations that we're talking about in the world? And also, do you think that there's hope in these efforts in order for an immediate ceasefire and halt of the Israeli military operations in Gaza?
Uh, well, I have to say that what South Africa did is, I'm looking at the news today and the social media, especially in the Arab world. I'm like, people are elated, and but at the same time, they are so embarrassed by the lack of action from Arab governments. Many people are saying, like, if you allow me just to share like one line that I've seen many people on Facebook use in
Yes,
today.
please.
Like, and of course, in Africa, like all countries, like in Europe, you have the European Championship. When all the European countries play football against each other. Africa, of course, how we have the Africa Cup and whatever it is. And actually, it's coming next week. Actually, we have the
Yeah,
Africa
this
Cup.
weekend.
Yeah. So, and Egypt always is a rival with other like South Africa, Nigeria, Senegal, and so on. Big thing in Africa, like it is in anywhere in the world. So people are actually today, they are writing a line. Somebody wrote it and everybody's copying it. And it says, I am Egyptian. So who you think I'll be rooting for? South Africa, of course. Yeah, it's like
I
everywhere.
agree. We should all do that.
Yeah, so people are just really like hats off to South Africa for taking this. That's the Arab side. I can see the official Israeli side is very angry and upset, and they are calling it names and everything. However, I mean, I believe that it's a good step in just making a statement. Will it go through? I mean, I am afraid that also the International Court of Justice is as politicized. I am not sure. I am not optimistic. And actually, that's where I'd be worried that, I mean, if they come up with a verdict or whatever they call it, ruling that, no, we don't have enough evidence of genocide. Oh, I mean, that would be just really like, what, are you endorsing this? I'm sure they're going to, if they come with a statement blunt that, yes, this seemed to be educated genocidal intent, then great. I mean, again, as somebody realizing that, no, don't try to hide behind collateral damage, bombing in a hospital and say, oh, because they have an office there. And many people argue that you could have done it in whole many different ways. You don't have to kill 1,000 civilians and children to kill one Hamas militant. It's ridiculous. I mean, the argument, obviously, there's dehumanization. There are acts of violence that were documented, even when they shot their own 3 people who were
Yeah.
carrying a flag and nothing. And so that shows you the mindset and how they are operating. So now, if we're going to get a verdict, fantastic. But I'm afraid that we are not going to get a verdict. I hope I'm wrong. And instead, we're going to get a wishy-washy statement.
It
Something
could
like,
be
yeah,
weaponized then, right? If, for example, the verdict is not explicitly recognizing that the genocide is happening, it can be weaponized by the Israeli government to continue their operation.
And then imagine the precedents it would set for other acts of that nature. As a matter of fact, I feel like sometimes when I look at what Israel is doing now in Gaza, I cannot separate that from some acts of violence that we saw, especially at the end of World War II. Of course, we know Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's like, you are deliberately bombing with an atomic bomb, and you know that millions, hundreds of thousands of civilians will die. And you say that that's because this would end the war faster. I mean, that logic was used. We know it happened. And then in the bombing that happened in Germany in the last year of the conflict, when Germany was just dying, and the Allies are just marching in. The bombardment of Dresden and other cities, the carpet bombing that happened, that just killed civilians after civilians, and a lot of actions, atrocities were committed at the end of that war, with no consequences whatsoever to those who committed those acts. I'm afraid that set precedents to how maybe some of the decision makers and those who have the decision to shoot a bomb in Gaza, fueled by what happened on October 7th, feeling that we are justified in bombing them back because of what they did to us. It is just adding. So if you end up with a verdict from the International Court of Justice saying, no, not really, nothing wrong happened here, can you imagine the next violent conflict? I mean, because this is not the last one. We're going to have another violent conflict. And we still have one, by the way, in Ukraine, still happening as we speak. Sudan is in big disaster. Uh, so there will be other conflict, and I'm afraid that will set a precedent that it's okay as long as you have an excuse why you need to bomb civilians, then because you're looking for one militant. I'm afraid that this would be a dangerous. But the good news about it is a new process that we haven't seen before. South Africa coming from nowhere. Of course, they have their history of apartheid. They know what they're talking about. And they are the ones coming and leading that case and making great arguments today in the court. That it's wherever it goes, it's going to be something that people will feel good about. Now, will it lead to stopping the war or ceasefire? I don't think that there's a connection between the two. I think those are two different processes. And I think the ceasefire, if it happens, it will happen for military and practical reasons, such as the Israelis, of course, they are in a big dilemma because of the hostages, and the people who are like 100 plus are still somewhere in Gaza. And the more they bomb, the more they kill more of them, the more the families get mad at the government. Can you imagine the dilemma? I mean, I don't envy, I have to say, any of those Israeli decision makers because they are in a big dilemma. You bomb, you kill your own people get mad at you, and it's a big mess. And you can see that the pain that many people in Israel are dealing with right now. And so, how do you get out of it? I mean, now the Hamas is saying, I'm not going to trade any prisoners unless we do a ceasefire. They raised their bar much higher than what happened 2 months ago when we got into a humanitarian pause, 3-4 days in return for exchanging the civilians. Now Hamas and others are saying, no way, we are not going to exchange one except with a complete ceasefire. Qatar and Egypt and US and others are trying their best to reach an arrangement that will allow for this to happen. How much Israel can, I think that Israel in this situation right now is probably, you need to think that if one side is not able to achieve their objectives in a conflict, one important dynamic is to think, how can I give them face saving as we are reaching an agreement. I am not saying, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like the Israelis are really suffering so much in this war, suffering military losses. I don't know how much you see it in the West, by the way, but I see it in the Arabic media. The Hamas people, they always have now a camera, believe it or not. And every time they are shooting a rocket at an Israeli tank, it is videotaped. You see it. I don't think you're seeing much of that in the West. But for me, because it's unbelievable. So they are actually enduring a lot of losses. It is not an easy war like they had in the past. So they are suffering on many levels. I am sure they want to find a way out of this that will secure the return of the hostages. But they also need to come out saying that we won, or somehow declare victory. How does this, can this happen while Hamas is still there? Finding a balanced diplomatic statement that can give face saving to the Israelis, so they can tell their people, because they're actually using a lot of media stuff to say, look, how much we found tunnels and how much we arrested many of them and da 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 da. So, but I can see some Israelis saying that's not true. That's not really what's happening on the ground. It looks like we are really suffering on many heavy losses. So I am sure that so I would say that any effort must think that the Israelis need face saving, get the hostages out, secure ceasefire at the same time, but ceasefire that is going to last. And I'm afraid that actually for Israelis, that means that you lost the war. You lost it. You lost. And as a matter of fact, But again, no, they cannot accept that. And Netanyahu, I think his own personal interest in the issue, his own political aspirations, he knows he's gone. He's gone for sure. So I'm afraid he's just extending his time, the way the war is being prolonged. And that is another dynamic that is not helping. I have a feeling, and that's my own guess that can be very, very wrong, has no science to it, but there might be something will happen inside Israel that will force this government to change, to bring somebody who's not as attached to what happened and feeling the grudge, and who can actually help to move to disengage. Netanyahu, I think, and the people around him are unable to. And maybe some people in Israel with common sense will say, no, no, we need leadership that will save Israel, not save Netanyahu. I think we're going to see interesting changes happening. Some are unexpected in the next few weeks, of all of which will lead to some type of a longer ceasefire and the exchange of the hostages. But I don't think that the imagination of Israel and US that the day after Hamas is gone and we're going to form some type of governance that we will choose, that whole dream, I think, is fading away. And but it's difficult really to guess what will happen after. But all in all, my own optimism tells me that the story changed significantly on many levels, and that the discussion after the war will be about we need to find satisfaction, real satisfaction to the Palestinian cause and the grievances, and to acknowledge that without that we will go to another cycle of violence and another October 7 and another October 7, and maybe even worse. So let us do something significant. I think the world is ready for something like that, and even the US feel that they need to do that. Otherwise, everybody knows now that the consequences is continuing episodes of this kind of violence.
What you just said was very, very hopeful. I wish that this realization is for as many people as possible in the world. Dr. Abdalla, you mentioned that you're optimistic that the world is being ready for positive change. So let's move on to some peace building perspectives. What common ground or shared values do you believe exist between the conflicting parties in Gaza? And like, how can those commonalities be leveraged for peace?
A very good question. And I will say that actually, I am again very optimistic that uh, optimistic about what? Optimistic about the capacity of people in the Arab world and in Palestine especially to coexist with people who are different ethnically, religiously, linguistically, culturally. It is not new in the Middle East to have this kind of coexistence. And actually, I have an example that I use often to illustrate that if we in the Arab world, especially Palestine, are not threatened that there is a group of people coming and they will take a piece of land and then kick everybody out of that piece of land and declare this is ours, no one else. This is for me the mistake of the Zionism project, is that exclusion and creating their own space and no one else come here. And if you end up being part of it, you are a second class to a great extent, then this is the problem. But if you come and you want to coexist with everybody, as I said, the Arabs and the Palestinians have the capacity to embrace people who are different. And my modern example for this is a story of what happened near the end of World War One, as the Ottoman Empire was falling apart, replaced by the new Turkish state. And there's, of course, a lot of issues happened, among them the issue of the tension between the Turkish or the Ottomans and the Armenians. The Armenian was part of the Ottoman Empire, and as I understand the story, is they felt that they betrayed them in the war or whatever it is, so they decided to punish them. So there was what the Armenians see as genocide that took place and ethnic cleansing. Many Armenians, that's very true, fled their home, their ancestral home, and they went into many places. Some went to Europe, some went to America. I am sure some went to Iran. I wouldn't be surprised. And many came where? Came to the Arab world. As a matter of fact, hundreds of thousands of Armenians fled the Ottoman Empire and the Turkish state that was just developed, and came where? Came to Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Palestine, Jordan, Egypt. I grew up in Cairo with so many Armenians around me. And what was fascinating is the Armenians who lived in all those countries. Until today, by the way, they preserve their language. So they still speak Armenian in their homes, and they have their own churches. The Armenian Orthodox Church, many of them. Egypt is full of them. They have their own social clubs that are actually exclusive. Like I had some Armenian friends, so maybe once or twice I went to this Armenian club with my friends when I was a teenager. And it was very cool to go there. They had music and bands and whatever. But they had their own lifestyle, yet they were so integrated with the Egyptian society. I think they knew very well, for example, that okay, I will never probably make it to become the president of Egypt or to become like a big shot in the government, and they understood that that space is more for the people who are more like have the identity that is Egyptian. But as Armenian who are fully Egyptian also by citizenship and everything, they have businesses. They became so rich. They did very well. They had even their schools, by the way. So imagine you have Armenian schools, Armenian churches, Armenian social clubs, and your language is preserved at your home. Yet you have the citizenship, and you are as Egyptian, as Jordanian, as Lebanese, as everyone else. And I tell you, every now and then I see a documentary that is some Armenian who is 80 years old talking about how when they came to this country when they were babies and how they lived all their life in Lebanon and Egypt or wherever it is. I cry when I see it and I have so many, of course, Armenian friends. I mean, one of my favorite UPEACers actually, Hovik. Hovik, he was 21 years old when I met him at UPEACE in 2003.
Yeah, I followed the course with him.
And Hovik, I mean, look at Hovik where he is now. I mean, he is in such a great position in the UNHCR. And when he came, I mean, he was Armenian, Lebanese. He speaks Arabic very well, very Arab in every way, and very Armenian in every way. And for me, that when I see this, I say, if we can embrace the Armenians like this, and they became part of the mix that we have, that we appreciate so much, I don't see why we cannot do the same thing with Jewish people. I mean, yes, they can have their own tradition, religion, culture, whatever it is, and we share so much with them. And many actually Arab Jews, people who are really identify until today as I am Jewish and Arab. For me, those are the ones that I see to be the nucleus of true peace, because they are the ones who can encourage. I don't care if you are Jewish, coming from Russia, coming from Latin America, wherever you are. This is for me the job that we Arab need to do, is to appreciate that Jewish people, in their history, in their religion, they have a strong, sincere attachment to that part of the world. Do not deprive them of this in the name of, the colonial project. I think that's what we've done and we had a good reason why we framed Zionism as a colonial project, because it was happening in the middle of all this that was happening by the British, the French, and everybody else. However, we need to see through it and to appreciate that, no, they have good reasons why they feel attached to this part of the land. How can we, and again, this is a skill of conflict resolution, how can I frame that attachment in a way that will give them space to feel free to be here, to live here, and those who don't want to live, they just want to have access to come to worship or whatever it is, also can have that license, but without jeopardizing other people who are living in the same land, and the Muslim, the Christian, everyone else. If we can have that formula, I think that for me, this is the true peace. And I mean, if you ask, I'm talking about basic human needs and everything we discuss in conflict resolution. If you ask an Israeli, like, what are the causes of the conflict, it will be identity. issue, of course, and security. Okay, I'll give you your identity and I'll give you your security. The only thing you are not going to get is that position of I must have that flag with the David star, and that it's a country that is called Israel, and everyone else is out, or everyone else is a second class, and it is the Jewish nation of the state. I'm sorry to say that, but I know that I heard that from some scholars and stuff. They insist on that notion, the Jewish nations of the state. I know where it's coming from. I know the fears. I know where they think that this is what will protect them. But guess what? Actually, that is what is not protecting you, is that you insist that this has to be exclusive to the Jews because of everything that happened in the last 2 centuries, maybe. But this has proven to be devastating because it infringes on the basic rights of other people. And when you are infringing on the basic rights of other people, what are you expecting? Yeah, you should expect October 7th and another October 7th and another October 7th. And the only way but we have a way out. We have the example of how the Armenians are coexisting while preserving their identity and while never persecuted in any of those countries. So why can't we do the same thing? All of us live together and let us be citizens. Let democracy guide us into who will become a president, who will become a congressperson. It's not about their being Jews or Arab or Muslim or Christian. It's about who is a good citizen. This is what democracy and nation state is about. And if we can move to a direction like this, then I think everyone will have achieved their real needs and identity needs, whether you are Jewish or Arab or whatever you are. And at the same time, we acknowledge that position of it must be a state called whatever and with a certain paradigm that is exclusive of others is not going to work. And again, big part of this is for the Arab people to accept and to embrace that, yes, Jewish people have a sincere, I call it sincere sentiment and attachment to that part of the world. This is the work that we need to do. It's not easy, by the way, because many people grew up over the last generations like hating anything relating to the notion of Zionism and thinking about it as it's imposed by the British and the French, and it is intended to just destroy us in the Arab world, and they cannot see it any way other than that. We have to do a lot, the peace community in the Arab world, to change, to reframe this. And who do we work with? Again, those Jewish people who I told you are walking out now and saying, not in my name. For me, those are the greatest allies. And I think it is finding those people, and there are so many of them, many. And I think making their voice more amplified in the Arab world. So people in the Arab world can see that, look at those people. Why would I be afraid of somebody like this? This is somebody who is actually embracing my cause, the Palestinian cause, while being Jewish. And that's what we need to connect with. For me, this is the beginning. Peace community in the who are Arabs with those people who are from the Jewish community. And I think if we know to work together and to work with that objective I'm talking about, because there are other peace groups that I see in Israel and other places, but I think that they are the ones who are working in the paradigm of the two-state solution. And I'm sorry, that's never going to work. I really don't believe in the two-state solution, only because the two-state solution will always have enemies on both sides who don't believe in it. And they are powerful enough to cause havoc. They have killed Isaac Rabin before, after he signed the peace in 1994 or 95. And they are the ones who led also intifadas and led to more violent actions on the other side. So I would say that the other approach, the reframing of issues in terms of identity and basic needs of security, if we understand it from both sides, then we can create more of citizenship that is across all religions, while appreciating that this land is for everyone. It is not for one religion over the other. And I think, I don't know, my feeling is that, believe it or not, all the disasters that we have seen in the last few months is getting us closer to this point. And I hope I am correct.
Um, I really think that my level of hope during the course of this episode and of optimism towards what is going on, you managed to increase it a lot. So I really thank you for this. Um, and also two things that I wanted just to link. It's not really a question, but maybe you can confirm this because it's something that I have read. Well, first of all, this was more widely known that, as you said, already within Israel before the events of October, there was a strong opposition in the public opinion against Netanyahu. And then the attention and the public opinion within Israel was then all moved towards, again, the enemy outside of the country. So still, there is hope that the tide can change against the government, which is especially taking more the side of the militaries, and is taking more side of the ultra orthodox, which are the most extremist viewers of Zionism, at least the ones in Israel. Because here I don't want to oversimplify things that I just know more superficially. And also one thing that I really liked is again relating to complexity, and it's something that, thanks to what you said before, now we have also medias that are giving us more information on things that I was completely unaware of. For example, even the complexity of the society within Israel, where you have a lot of different um, ethnic groups. Let's call them like that. You have, for example, Arab Jews. You have Jews actually that emigrated with the construction of the state of Israel, for example, from Western Europe, from Eastern Europe. And also within that community, you have different power levels, you have different discrimination. For example, I was reading that it's more common that Arab Jews suffered more discrimination in the society, or even, for example, Jews coming from Yemen when they
Or
moved to
Ethiopia.
Israel,
Yeah.
they faced a lot, or from Ethiopia, they faced a lot of discrimination. So it's also these parts of the society that can create commonalities, as Nikki was asking you, with the two sides, and for then finding a solution that is different from what we've seen until now, that has just created havoc.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you are very, very correct that there are all those dynamics. Of course, as we have seen in Israel before that whole October 7th happened, there were demonstrations almost every day because of the judiciary reforms that they were talking about, and other issues. And yes, the issues of the sense of discrimination that some people from time to time feel because of their ethnicity or background. Uh, yes, there are deeper issues in that society. And when it comes to even the issue of Palestinians and how to deal with Palestine, you have of course, the ultra radical groups who don't think that anyone is entitled to this land except if you are Jewish. And this is where actually you cannot dismiss. I mean, they are real. I mean, those settlers. Yeah, we don't appreciate their position. We think it's not fair, but they are real. They exist, and they are building settlements, and they find the legal way to do it and the illegal way to do it. In the process, it's coming with a lot of hatred to Palestinians and others. How can you deal with those people? But also, the good news is you have other people who are way more aware of the rights of Palestinians and the rights of people who are undermined because of the policies of Israel, and a lot of foundational dimensions of establishing it, that actually they feel that no, we need to change it. We got to, again, I like what Nikki said earlier about the parties. This is a party we need to connect to, a party that among the Israeli people and the Jewish people, people who understand that there is something not okay and we need to do something about it. And we need to build the bridges with them and to assure them in the process of also the intention on the Arab side that we want you to be part of this. We want space for the Jewish people to come to this country and to be part of it. And I think the more we do this, we may actually start to bring even the other side that is now radical in the peace camp, because if they realize that their real need is about identity and about security and safety, then the more they realize that that peace discourse that we're talking about is going to satisfy this for them, then why not? I mean, why should I insist on the position of it must be a state only for my own people in the way I think we should be? And if I see that this one keeps on causing violence, causing dissatisfaction to other people, and I am hurting in the process, it will make all the sense that, wait a minute, if I can satisfy all my interests and all my needs by going through that path of peace with others, then why not? And I think that the religious script here can come so handy. I was touched on many occasions in the last few weeks listening to Jewish people who would say that it is my Jewish beliefs that will make me feel that this is not okay what I see. My Jewish beliefs of justice, of equality, I mean, we need to connect to that level. And the same thing for the Muslims and Christians. We have plenty of principles that can connect us together as humans. And this is the job of our community of peace, to push those agendas, to promote them from a religious perspective, from a humane perspective. And I am sure that we can achieve something better. And maybe we are in the right point in this conflict, believe it or not. In our Islamic faith, there is a beautiful verse in the Quran that says in Arabic, "Inna ma'al usri yusra." And that means that with every difficulty, there is ease. It's not like after difficulty there is ease. It is inna ma'al usri, with the difficulty, there is ease. And I think that what we are seeing now is a transformation. Actually, that statement is about transformation. That transformation is difficult, it's painful. But while it is painful, it's almost like birth. It leads to creating something better. And I am hopeful that what we are seeing in the last few months is a very painful process that seems to carry with it elements of change that is going to be very positive.
Nikki, I think you're
Well,
muted.
I mean, I want all the questions that we had in hand. You were so comprehensive in answering all of them that I don't know what to say. The only thing that I can ask is, as you said, like as peacekeepers, as a community of peacemakers, we have to advocate for the values that you just talked about. But how do you think, like, what should we focus in our advocacy efforts in order to achieve sustainable peace, something that's more sustainable, and we reach to that as soon as possible?
Okay, well, as soon as possible. I mean, I guess here we are dealing with violence that is so severe. We are dealing with human beings, citizens, and average people are suffering on a basic level that I cannot even, I mean, I'm sure you know what we're talking about. That is just unbelievable. And this has to stop. There's just nothing can happen while people are suffering at that level. And whether it is for the short term, or don't underestimate that child who lost every family member and probably lost a piece of their body in the process, and saw the atrocities and saw that their home is gone and everything that happened around them in the last few months. How do you see that child when they are 20 years old if things have not changed? I mean, don't forget that actually those who did whatever October 7 was, or are others, they were also 2, 3 years old 20 years ago. And they saw atrocities of that nature. And that fueled in them that I am fighting a vicious enemy and I am doing the right thing by fighting viciously. And the same can happen on the other side. We need to stop this violence and we need to quickly deal with the humanitarian crisis. This should be a priority right now. And then we need to also think as a peace community carefully about the levels of what we want to achieve. Some stuff, as we know, that if you want to change things on the long term, it will take time. It will take education, it will take media, it will take reforms on very basic level, and you cannot see the outcome of that for the next maybe until 10, 15, 20 years. But there are things that can be done immediately. So number one, of course, is reaching some form of a ceasefire, making sure that there is humanitarian assistance that is happening right away, and restoring to people to hopefully to their deserved home, no more displacement of any type. Um, at the same time, I think that we can start to enter into some form of uh, negotiations, mediation, or anything of that type that actually will recognize everybody. I know that many people don't want to say like Hamas terrorist organization, you don't talk to them. I'm not necessarily advocating for Hamas or others, but all I can say is once upon a time, Nelson Mandela was a terrorist. Once upon a time, FARC was a terrorist. Once upon a time, the Irish, I can't remember their name, of course, the famous
IRA.
IRA was a terrorist. You name it. In Nepal, the same story, the Mao group. So the idea that some group is seen as a terrorist, uh, their acts are terrorist, maybe, if you, and you can frame it as such, but their existence, their cause, their is not terrorist itself. Actually, it is resistance, legitimate resistance, because they are fighting for sincere grievances of people. And that was the case across the board. At one point in the fighting, we reach a point that if we give them some recognition and work with them politically, we can probably reach some form of agreement. And the history shows. I mean, why are we high? I mean, look around. Look at Colombia. Look at South Africa. Look at Ireland, and probably there are so many others, and Nepal, and this is enough for us to say that maybe when we think of who comes to the table, we should learn from the lesson of why 1993 peace accord failed, and because obviously they failed now. I mean, 1993, Yasser Arafat and Rabin and holding hands, and they are signing peace agreement. Everything is great. We're going to have peace finally in Palestine and Israel. Look where we are now. And that's why, in my opinion, because we did not take into consideration all the stakeholders and the parties. There are people on both sides who were not happy with this kind of agreement that of the 1993 peace accord. And so what the Oslo Agreement, as they call it, we need to get the other people, even the ones who we think are fringes and they are the extremists. Actually, you want to call Hamas terrorist, whatever you want to call it. By the way, many people don't know that Hamas was actually came to power by election and democratic elections. Uh, and I'm sure there is a space you can talk to them. And after everything that happened, probably they are more prepared to engage in a dialogue. And if we can succeed in bringing them to the table, along with other Palestinian forces, and if we can get more of the Israeli society at large to be represented in this, maybe we will start to develop arrangements that will achieve the security and identity needs on both sides. Of course, now I cannot separate this from the grudges and the pain that happen on both sides. I mean, that's human. I mean, how can I ask somebody now that their home is bombed on either side? Or, I mean, the Israelis living in the Gaza, no matter how much this was occupied land, still for someone that was home. And now they were forced to leave their home right now for the last 3 months. And they have seen people getting shot and killed in front of them. This pain and the pain on the other side that is equal or even worse. How can I get those people with the pain they are carrying to sit in a peace process? It's not that simple. Trauma work and work on that psychological dimension is going to be critical. And we need to be creative in how we do it. The good news is, believe it or not, both sides have strong religious convictions that actually can come handy in helping people dealing with trauma. Faith can become very effective, actually, in helping people to move forward beyond the pain of that what they have seen. So again, maybe opportunities are opening up for us, peace community, to do things and to explore new territories. But I would say number one, humanitarian assistance immediately, ceasefire immediately. Small steps in negotiations and dialogue that is inclusive to groups that otherwise we don't think that we should include, and long term based on that vision I suggested of let's all live together, and we need on the Arab side to admit and accept the sincerity of Jewish people that to be part of this world, and the Jewish people to accept that yes, we can be in this part of the world, but we need to accept that we're always going to live at par with other people. And that is the long-term story, that the peace building and conflict transformation story that I hope we can work towards and build for the next 3 decades.
Professor, I think with all these answers, we really got a widening perspective, much more hopeful, and we already learned much more. So I honestly don't have anything to add and also to take from your time. So I don't know about Nikki, but this was really amazing.
Thank you, Dario.
Yeah, this is really great because I've been listening to a lot of interviews and like YouTube series that's been working on this, but yours had a lot of hope, and as Dario said, it broadened our perspectives on a very brightened future. And as you said, like in times of crisis, there's always a hope for a change, a big change, which I can see it in you as a peacemaker, and you gave it to us fully too. So if there's anything to add, please, or any other notes or anything for the people in the world on how they can help this situation, what efforts can they do to help the situation, and I don't have anything else to add to.
I will say that this number one, I have to thank you so much for opening this space. By the way, this is probably the first interview or discussion I have that will be publicized on the issue. I just arranged it in my college, at Juniata College, actually, for colleagues to come and speak about the topic from George Mason University, and they did a great job. But this is, I thank you, give me the space to express myself. I know that everything I said is going to maybe, as you say, be optimistic and hopeful to many people. It may upset, I'm sure I will upset people on both sides. There's no way that you're going to please everybody. And as a matter of fact, if I please everyone, then something is wrong, especially in a time of conflict. So I was not shy to express where I stand on those issues. I was not shy to express that I definitely grew up with the Palestinian cause and I insist on it and I realize the injustice. But I also grew up and lived around many beloved Jewish and people in the United States and other places that made me learn that they have their good reasons why they are attached to that part of the land. And I feel that this is what Arabs need to learn to embrace better. And I am still hopeful that the one who, as the solution is in those two communities to give legitimacy to each other. At the same time, it's not easy now given all the pain that happened. Let's hope that we will quickly work towards humanitarian assistance. And I would say that your question, Nikki, now was like, what can be done specifically or what? And I would say, let us make use of especially social media, just like we're doing now. I mean, this is not going to go on CNN. This is going to go probably, as you said, Facebook and other platforms. And let's use the social media to rally more people to our cause, to amplify the voices on both sides of people who are talking about sincere, genuine peace. I also hear sometimes, because I have to say my critique is sometimes I see that there are some people who they sound like voices of peace, and I think they are, but I am afraid that the way they think about it is still trying to, as we say in Arabic, hold the stick from the middle. Sometimes when you insist on holding the stick from the middle, meaning you want to please everyone, you end up not pleasing anybody. And I think that we need more people to be brave, recognize that something is wrong in the story, and there's injustice. And it doesn't matter if I'm Jewish or Arab, I need to acknowledge it. And at the same time, acknowledge that we must learn to live together. And if we can get more people to embrace this story, I think that we have an opportunity, and the opportunity is growing thanks to the changes happening and the technology and the social media, the space given to ordinary people to speak, express themselves. As the traditional media people are being exposed, as we said in the very beginning. Hopefully, that will help them to change the way they do things. And maybe that learning how to influence decision makers in powerful countries such as the United States. And I think we are becoming more savvy in how to influence them as an Arab and Muslim community living in the United States. So maybe all this will start to have an effect. So we just need to be aware of what are our buttons that seem to, when we push, they are helping, and to put our energy there. And hopefully this will help us to find ourselves in a better place very, very soon.
We
Yeah, thank you
really,
so
really
much,
hope
Dr.
that,
Abdullah. This was amazing.
Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you.
really, thank you very much. And we hope that this episode can reach an audience that will also have our same experience and expand their knowledge, be more hopeful, be more aware, and yeah, like also I suggest to everyone to follow Professor Abdallah's work. We were gonna post the link of his website on our platform. So if you are also more interested in learning about peace building and his unique perspective on peace building, it's definitely one source that we really recommend.
Absolutely. And in a world that is so polarized, not only in the area of the conflict, but in the world globally, hearing your perspectives was very hopeful. And I hope that everyone enjoyed it and everyone's learned a lot from it. Thank you so much, Dr. Abdullah, for this opportunity.
Thank you so much to the two of you, and so good to see you again, Dario. So good to see you, Nikki. And let's stay in touch.